hope for.
Yeah, we can edit it, that part.
Yeah.
Someone will mindlessly type in Peterson, and if they click to the third page of results,
Right.
they will see
If
our
I
broadcast.
ever want to kill somebody, I'll bury their body on the second page of Google results, where nobody ever clicks.
Just research with different words
Yeah.
before you go there.
DuckDuckGo.
It's playing the ad, and then after that, we'll hear if the audio works. I think the audio is pretty solid. I can't imagine it being too bad.
Yeah, we can up the gain a little bit if you want. It's not hitting
No,
yellow.
I think it's tuned fine here.
Okay.
Hello.
We don't have a fan or anything, and it's not touching yellow.
All right. Little pre-show here as we get ready to do another podcast. It's been a couple weeks.
It's been a few weeks, actually more weeks than we wanted it to be, right?
Yes. Hey, it says we're live. Well, that's good. I mean, I can see we're not live, but is the microphone? Unmute that. Just make sure it's on the Twitch player that's muted. The computer should be unmuted. So the computer's unmuted now, but if you could drag the mouse to the movie player and unmute, you can actually make sure it's working. It's on the left side of the video player.
I would
Yeah.
love to use a mouse that worked.
Sorry. It is really sensitive.
All right, here we go.
Left side of the. All right, cool. You just hit mute again. We're good.
All right, we're good.
That sound quality is really good.
Cool.
Coming
We're in
out
business
there.
then.
All right.
All right, fellas,
Didn't commit the cardinal sin of not having audio for a full hour.
and we're actually recording.
Well, yeah, it's the Twitch has got the archive thing. We proved that worked last week, but I don't have disk space in my camera or on my computer to record.
So why should we?
Well, we're hoping Twitch cuts it. And they served us well last week.
So, this is one of the shortest chapters in the book.
Is it?
It's got to be. I mean,
I
it's
believe.
like 10 pages.
Yeah, I listened to it this afternoon.
Yeah.
And thankfully, because that's all the time I allotted for preparing
Right.
for this this podcast, and so I was glad to see that it was only a half an hour. But a deep one, a lot packed in here, for sure.
Yeah, I got from our meeting, I got almost like a page and a half of notes here.
It's
Even for 10 pages.
Yeah, it's a very much sorting ourselves out part of the book, right? It's a
lot about judgment, criticism, I think strategy and risk, soaking up wisdom, nihilism, a lot of different topics.
Okay, so Ryan and I were at the meetup this past week, and
How did it
Casey
go?
wasn't.
No.
So let us kind of maybe fill in Casey. That could be a good introduction to what we were talking about.
In about a minute here, which I'll also do introductions too, just to say who we are and why we're here.
Sure.
Okay.
In a minute here or no?
I don't know if this is the pre-show or not. If we're actually starting, if we're going to start, we probably should do intros. So I'm just trying to make a note of that.
Intro.
Hi.
Ryan, tell me about yourself.
I'm Ryan. I don't have much to say except for I like Jordan Peterson and yeah. Sorry, I don't got much for an intro.
Casey, I also like Jordan Peterson, so that's why I'm at a Jordan Peterson meetup and doing a Jordan Peterson podcast. So, yeah.
Okay, I'm Garrett. I like Jordan Peterson. If that's what we're talking about. So we typically once a week we have a Napa Jordan Peterson meetup where we go chapter by chapter and we talk about each rule so far, right? So this past week we started with or we caught up to, I should say, rule 6, which was let's read
Set
the
your
rule.
house in perfect order before criticizing others.
Yeah, before you criticize the world. So
Oh, there we go.
So that's a challenge, right? I mean, you can't. So you're telling me I can't criticize the world unless I have my house in perfect order,
That would be a very direct interpretation.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think it's very much like ye who's not guilty cast the first stone.
Okay.
That was a deep breath.
It wasn't. I was sorry. I considered your statement because it's like it is that, but it's more of I think it's just more not less having to do with guilt or judgment. It's just the wrong focus. Probably at this stage in your life, to be looking outside of yourself for any of the solutions to the problems that you're experiencing.
Okay.
There's work to do inward, and even yourself and in the small circle of people around you before trying to think that you know the answers to the world's problems, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's just, like I said, taking the chapter of the title literally and trying to approximate it to something popular. But the chapter does touch on a lot more than that as it goes in depth. And like you said, it's a lot about there's always work to be done on yourself. So if you can improve yourself first, and it's really about prioritizing where you put your focus. And there's more gains to be done on yourself if you believe you can control yourself and the things around you. And if that's the only thing you can control, well, that's a good place to start.
And I don't know if we want to go there right away, but it's like so timely. This type of this message is just so timely for now, I think, because whenever I look at social media or hear any sort of political discussion, it's people are looking for what someone else is doing wrong. It's like very much trying to point out the problems in wherever, in whatever context they are, whether it's with another person, someone in charge, the democracy itself. It's just so outwardly focused. I think a lot of the comments that I come across, I guess.
It's like a criticism of other people's standing.
Yeah, and you would think that it's just, and it is a little bit like casting the first stone. It's because who are you? Like, I mean, how do you know that you're perfect in any of these regards that you want to criticize others in? So, and it's a lot right now. I think it's like calling people racists and bigots, and a lot of this political discussion is just
it seems to be the go-to, right?
Opposite of this, right?
Yeah, it seems to be like that's the first thing people go to is calling each other the worst thing that they can think of.
And I was having a discussion. I wasn't having a discussion. I read something that Arthur had sent me. It was a Facebook post, right?
Okay.
And it was a conversation that he was having with somebody, and it was kind of a rant about. It was a discussion over the Kavanaugh hearings and about women and men and toxic masculinity and like men having too much power and stuff. And it just makes me wonder, like, I know there's a lot of people out there that experience these negative things, right? But it makes me wonder how much of it are actually affected by it, or if it's just something that only exists in the space of social media. Or like it's just there so that they can criticize something, and it's all outward focused. But is it real? I don't know. I think for them, is it real?
Yeah, I think it is. There's an element of venting. Like you're angry, and this is just the direction you're going to vent. You have all these things go into your life, and it's just one way to blow off steam, right? And I think the major crime in social media is that a lot of posters take things out of context, and that can easily get people riled up because they think they know what the intent of the speaker originally was. And it is society's job to judge others and keep people in line with shame. I mean, that's one of the functions of society. But you have a major fault when you don't have the complete picture. And I think that's where we fall down a lot. A lot of people aren't going to do the due diligence to make sure what what the speaker meant, and it's a lot easier just to fire off some anger and a release valve kind of for some of that stress and pressure in your life. If you can criticize others, there's definitely some type of release you feel.
The shaming is insane, though. It really is. Like the I wonder if there's a place. I would like to see all of the people who spend a lot of their time shaming others, where like, and it's just a place where they can go and they're just perfect and they run a perfect society and they're just the perfect human beings. They have nothing to work on themselves. They've just reached pinnacle, like, what's the right word?
Maybe that's
self-actualization, and they just have all of the answers and know exactly where everyone else is coming from and where they're wrong.
I think it's so much easier though to point out like in others their problems than to find in yourself your own problems. I mean, it's so much easier.
It's almost though that's like a focus. It's like if I can just focus on that, then I don't have to think about what the hell is wrong with me.
Yeah, look how bad these other people are.
I can solve somebody else's problem instead of solving my own problem. It seems like an easier problem to tackle.
It's very narcissistic. It's like, I'm criticizing you that I think I'm better, whether I'm blind to that or not, and you should change. Like, it's a judgment, and I'm better than you, it feels like. And so
then in keeping with the chapter or the rule of trying to make sure you've got your own world in order, your own house in order before you go criticizing the world. How do you take your own advice, basically? How do you say, okay, well, I can solve all these other people's problems. Like I have all these solutions to these other people's problems, but really I need to focus on my own problems. So how do you reel that back in?
Well, I think, you really have to determine if you have an expertise in the topic, because there's really a chance you could help someone, but you have to be willing to put a level of effort in. Like, you got to put the time in to really help that person, and not just fire off a 140 character tweet and expect that to change that person's mind. I mean, it's a real investment to be open, listen to the problems the other person's having, figure out where they're going wrong, and try to get them to see that. It's not an easy task, and it's not.
I think there's some very concrete things you can do. Like, I think I think to follow this advice practically, you really need to shrink your sphere of concern. Shrink it up. Okay. You can turn off the TV and never watch the news.
Absolutely. You
can turn off your social media and not watch that news or the blast of opinionated nonsense from it to get sucked up into it, because it's there to enrage you, to get you thinking that something matters more than it might to you.
Right.
So you shrink it so that when you look around, you see what actually matters to you. Like, who are you affecting? And it's the opposite, I think, of. I'm not saying like it's not like you don't go vote. You can still vote. You can still get your voter guide and educate yourself and understand, different propositions and candidates, and you can be active politically. Mm-hmm. But it's not the main concern of your life, and you're not going to affect it. You're going to be spinning your wheels, and you're going to get frustrated. And so I think it's practically you just need to start focusing on what really matters. And initially that might just be yourself, and it might be your family that's like literally right next to you. Mm-hmm. That other stuff, it's not important right now to me,
And like I said, maybe an area of competence where you're up on the hierarchy, because like I said, I think education is a responsibility too.
Reading. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But really, it's like reading an actual book that you choose to better yourself instead of scrolling or watching the news.
That passive news feed of feed me something that already feeds into my beliefs. Like I see that on. So I've kind of quit
Bubbles.
the Facebook thing, but I still see my wife being on Facebook, and I still see the black and white text kind of posts, or whatever the meme posts of here's a virtuous thing to believe.
Yeah,
here's a thing
right.
that everybody should be good with.
Let
kind
me
of
make this
thing.
woke statement right now.
Woke, yeah, exactly. Here's a woke meme.
This is the best way to say this one thing.
Totally, and everybody
On the
says
internet today.
everybody says yes, thumbs up that, like that,
Yeah.
like it, and that feels good to like it. But what's it doing? You're not doing anything.
I agree, and I think you're actually causing yourself to have mental health problems.
I think so.
And that sounds crazy.
No, I agree.
I think you really. I know people that I see on Facebook who, they must spend large part of their day just looking at posts and then reposting these very kind of, they're outraged. They're meant to be, induce outrage.
Yeah.
These posts, and
It's meant to be
you
polarizing.
can tell that she's clearly outraged as well.
Yeah.
And man, if she would just stop focusing on all that, because of course there's terrible shit happening in the world.
Right.
Right. So
No doubt.
you could put yourself in a real mental state by
Yeah.
concerning yourself with it and thinking that you need to solve it somehow and that you need to advocate and be a voice. And again, it's not like you can't have opinions about these things, but if it's going to consume your area of concern, you're lost. I mean, you're just going to be, you're going to give yourself mental health problems. I do believe that.
Yeah, a lot of people treat social media like a journal, which is completely the wrong thing to do. I mean, manners used to dictate you don't talk about religion and politics in public.
Right.
And Facebook's a very public place.
That's
yeah.
all
And
it's talked about.
And now we're relearning these reasons of why we had these
Money,
established.
religion, politics. That was those were the ingredients you don't include in a good dinner conversation, right? Like you go to dinner with people, you don't discuss money, politics, religion.
Yeah, now we're clearly seeing the reasons for that. And
Yeah.
I think I tried to remind people, but that's just more finger waving. It's
Right.
Right. And that's my virtue signaling
That's
to
what
you.
we're doing.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So it's incredibly tough, and like I said, I think it's the internet's in its like not infancy anymore. I think we're about a teenager now, and we're going through some
Sure.
growing pains, and we're all having to learn how to do it. So I'm hoping that we go through a couple more bumps, but we all get smarter about it. Like the culture in general, hopefully learn from our past mistakes, and we hopefully develop some, anti-tribal behaviors moving forward, because it's just going to lead to violence.
So how do we get anti-tribal? Because I think that's the key, right? Because I think we're ultimately becoming tribal.
Well, I think the number one thing is we got to put the individual over our groups. So that means there's no one in the world as more unique as me. I have all my sexual preferences, my gender, all these different classes I fall in, my ethnicity, race, religion, thousands of different categories I fit in. But
Things that make me.
But what makes me is that unique individual, and as long as we put that in forward and realize that all of us are unique individuals, and not just say this one group's more important than your one particular group, because we belong to thousands of groups. How could you ever, figure all that out? And as long as we treat each other as individuals and learn to respect those that deserve respect, not everyone deserves respect or empathy.
That's interesting.
The challenge I think with that is that it's much easier to build your identity around a group identity than it is to make your own identity. So like, if there is something about you that it comes easily to you, your race, religion, sexuality. And I say it comes easy because that's just, you're born with it, right? So,
without thought, that's who you are.
and then I can therefore belong to a group and kind of have a lot of the work done for me in terms of who I am, and what I'm supposed to think and represent, and then it's so welcoming.
You're becoming part of that tribe, right? So
Yeah.
that's even as nuanced as you can get. There's a tribe for that. It feels like, and it feels like once you become part of that tribe, you're almost locked in.
It's really difficult to become an individual.
Yeah.
So it's like focusing on the individual is great, but it's actually really hard to know who the hell you are.
Yeah.
And if you can kind of just leave all that aside and just be this thing and be accepted, that's very enticing to young people who are being told that
They're not
that
normal.
is the utmost important thing to be anyway, as is part of a group. And then leave all of that kind of individual development work behind.
Yeah, and it's not one or the other, like be an individual and ignore all groups. No, you never give up your sexual preference. That's part of who you are. You can't just ignore it. You have to use that tribe and that group and pull strengths from it, the things you like and the things you don't like. You just can't ignore it either. So I think Peterson tries to preach a priority, not a zero-sum game where it's either tribes or individuals. And I think a lot of people get confused with that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like part of what a recurring theme throughout the book is making the individual better, making the group better, by means of a better individual. Like it feels like it's a stepping up game. Like you make the individual better, and better able to not lock yourself into tribes. I mean, or whatever tribes you lock yourself into. You're not locking yourself. You're fluid, right? You're able to pick and choose. You're able to be the individual based on maybe tribal identities, but you're able to still be the individual.
Yeah, by being critically thinking, being open to others' ideas, not being so sure about yourself. There's a lot of great things he proposes, and I think that, like you said, makes a stronger individual. And since there's only a limit of things you can actually control in the world, if you focus on what you can control, you can make a huge difference in your own life, which is the most important, and then potentially all of those groups you belong to lives too, as you participate and become a stronger contender. And I think it was like one thing in the chapter is talking about Tolstoy's 4 outcomes, right? One of the outcomes is, to make the world a better place, right? And by making your world a better place, that compounds. And every time the society plays its iterative game, you want the result of this society to build a better one, or at least the same, and not get a worse society. And I think that outcome from Tolstoy is the optimal one, and he goes into a little depth in this chapter explaining about why that is the better of the other 4 options.
So let me call that out real quick so we can discuss it a little bit deeper. So try as he might, Tolstoy could identify only 4 means of escaping from such thoughts. One was retreating into childlike ignorance of the problem. Another was pursuing mindless pleasure. The third was continuing to drag out a life that is evil and meaningless, knowing beforehand that nothing can come of it. And he identified that particular form of escape with weakness. The people in this category know that death is better than life, but they do not have the strength to act rationally and quickly and put an end to the delusion by killing themselves. Only the 4th and final mode of escape involved, quote, strength and energy. It consists of destroying life once one has realized that life is evil and meaningless. Tolstoy relentlessly followed his thoughts, and it quotes from that.
And that's the action of the nihilist, basically.
I think so, yeah.
The strong-willed.
Yeah. Incredibly strong-willed.
It's the reasonable thing to do to commit suicide or murder in that.
It seems like it's been distilled down into those are the most rational paths.
Yeah, and the problem with pleasure seeking is it's like a travel poster, as Peterson says. It's like you want to be on the beach with beer, but how many hours do you want to be that? It's not a whole week worth. You're going to be sunburned and drunk off your ass and not very happy.
Just quite miserable after 4 days of margaritas.
You're pickled, you feel like shit. Yeah.
So, I can definitely see pleasure seeking has bad long-term benefits. It's very short-sighted, and that's the problem with that.
It's not even. It's empty.
Yeah.
It's just completely empty activity.
It feels more empty than the first option, which is the childlike ignorance of the problem. I mean, at least if you pretend the childlike ignorance of the problem, you're not just sincerely lying to yourself. You're just. it's like omission of the truth versus lying.
On the pleasure seeking thing, I want to ask you guys a question. Do you think that it becomes that it becomes different as you grow older? I feel like in my personal experience, number 2, pursuing mindless pleasure, seemed like a really meaningful space for my younger life. Like, clearly this is excellent, and why and doing things that I enjoyed that were like purely pleasure seeking it seemed meaningful. I don't know if maybe I didn't know what true meaningful activity was.
It seemed worthwhile.
Because it was great. But and then there came a point where it was like, where now if I even wanted to, it's like it's almost tempting to try and act in that way. It's like I want to like do something pleasurable that like, oh, I just want to spend like all day watching football, or like I just want to like do this one thing that I know I enjoy, and find it completely meaningless. Like even while it's happening, it's like this is not even pleasurable anymore. Like at least my brain's not, at least it's not work, but I don't know it. But there's something to me that seems like happened with as I grew older.
I agree. I think as you seek pleasure, let's say, and you do short-term planning, all of a sudden, as the long-term approaches, you realize, hey, this isn't a great strategy. And so I definitely think when you're younger, you probably seek more pleasure because why long-term plan? You perceive time was a lot slower than we do now as older.
You don't have the hindsight mechanism. So like if you
yeah.
tried doing that, the whole time you were doing that, you would think, oh shit, I should be doing something else. Like this is the wrong thing I should be doing. But when you're younger,
why do you know that though? Why do you know that at 34 as opposed to 24?
I don't know.
Experience.
Yeah. No, you're right. That's exactly I think what you're saying.
It doesn't feel like experience. It doesn't feel like a rational thinking. It just feels differently. Like it's actually like
you just
knowledge.
know better.
Yeah,
kind of.
you just know better. I don't know.
Yeah, you know that the
better.
pleasure for me, it feels like the pleasure that I'm getting from being mindfully ignorant or pleasureful of whatever I'm doing doesn't feel as rewarding as it should be, because I feel like there's this other responsibility that I'm not tending to. So I feel like just by seeking that pleasure and by doing that pleasurable thing, I'm actually doing myself a disservice.
Yeah.
I'm digging into the pleasure of future me.
And it's depressing.
It is absolutely depressing.
The pleasurable thing is like actually like it's no longer pleasurable. It's actually depressing as I'm doing it.
Yeah.
What the?
Yeah. No,
it can feed into itself. Too.
Absolutely. It defeats the thing you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And the thing that I've found is that instead of like just sitting there and seeking that simple pleasure of taking a nap or
Netflix.
Playing a video game or Netflix or binging on whatever, yeah, exactly, doing something totally selfish. I feel like my time is better spent playing with my kid.
Right.
Like I feel like that's a better, more selfish thing to do in some way. I don't know how to reconcile that. I feel like that's what you're.
It is exactly right. And in like how to first you have to recognize that and then stop pursuing mindless pleasure, thinking that it's going to be somehow pleasurable.
Right.
Because it's really not going to be.
Because you feel that that it's not going to be. It's not as pleasurable as doing the thing that you really should be doing. And yeah, it's a struggle knowing that here's this thing that I know I should be doing, and I'm trying to escape it and give myself pleasure by not doing that. But in fact, I'd be, better off doing the thing that I should be doing. That's weird.
I think to go back, why you miss that in use is you've never really maybe had those really meaningful experiences, and as you start getting those, you're missing out on something when you're older. But when you're younger, pleasure's pleasure at that point.
Sure.
It seems true as well. Yeah, because like I don't think I've ever experienced anything meaningful until I want to say it till I had kids, and then trying to be good at that. The first thing was like, okay, it was going to give you meaning to be good at this thing. Mm-hmm. Like, and then it was super. That's super powerful. Mm-hmm. It's like, wow, this is really
nothing else has that meaning anymore. I mean, when I go home and I'm like, I can sit there and I could read a book on my Kindle or whatever, or I can, hey, Dad, you want to play with me? You know, like, fuck yeah. Like, let's play. Like, I don't, whatever book is going to be there 20 years from
But
now.
not all the time, though. I mean,
Not all the time.
right? Though, because
No,
that's when
I'm
you're
not perfect.
Yeah,
like, I'm not
when
trying to
you're
say, like, yeah, let's play all the time, and that's all I'm good
Let me
for.
say my story, because I work at home, so I have 24/7 access to my
Yeah.
kid. So I'm at the other extreme. It's like, am I playing with my kid too much? Should I be working right
Yeah.
now? Am I hurting my kid's future because I'm hurting my salary by
Right.
not putting the hours in? So
Right.
I'm at the opposite end. So there's definitely some type of like work-play balance there, and I don't know how you rectify that with you know, the whole responsibility thing. You just got to figure out what has meaning right now. Are you playing with my kid or working for my kid's future to make sure I can feed and clothe them?
You know,
Yeah.
Peterson was talking about how meaning is actually a sixth sense, or it's actually an evolved sense in a real way, and maybe the most important human developed sense.
Okay.
So in your predicament, you know which one you should be doing because you actually
Sometimes.
feel it. That's I think that's what I've heard him talk about before, and I know that you know that feeling. It's like the feeling like you know you should be doing something else.
Yep.
He talks about the solar plexus, right? When we tell a lie, we can feel our gut get weak, right? Or we'll go, was it humph or something? We'll make, when we get defensive, we go,
Yeah. Huh.
yeah, right. And you feel that in your solar plexus. So that's another sense he was talking about, how you can kind of feel whether you're, I guess that's meaningful or not, or if you're, you know.
It's interesting because it's biological as well. Like I think the times that I fail to do what's meaningful and I do what's, this is a different chapter, expedient or pleasurable, right?
Well, they all interlink.
Yeah.
I've narrowed it down to I'm physically tired. Like I didn't get enough sleep for whatever reason.
Okay.
And so it's like, I just not, my brain isn't working in the right way to provide those kind of reward mechanisms,
Yeah,
which
you know,
like I think is what it's like meaningful stuff.
Yeah.
Is this actual reward mechanism in the brain, this dopamine release or whatever it is, you know, and if I'm not,
Some type of neurochemical.
yeah, so it you know, there's a biological element as well. It's not, you know, how strong of a character you are necessarily, all the time.
Okay. Could be a contributing factor, but
Yeah.
it's not the deciding factor. So
But when you're slacking off, I definitely think you feel weaker, right?
I think I feel it. So I know that when I'm a little bit tired, right? So I've had a long day at work, whatever. It doesn't matter what it is. Physical, mental, it doesn't matter what it is. But then your kid comes to you and says, I want to play. There's the intuitive, okay, you need to go play by yourself because that's valuable, versus I need to play with you because that's valuable. Versus, it's all these balancing factors, and it's all that, and the thing that I've kind of taken from this chapter is you can start to stop doing what you're doing now, right? Like the thing where no, I'm not going to play with you because I kind of just don't feel like it. I'm just going to fart around on my phone or whatever. Like, that's what doesn't feel good. And that's what I shouldn't do. So when I realize that I'm doing that, I stop doing that. And I start doing the thing that I know is the right answer. And the right answer is, okay, let's go play. Let's build Legos, let's read a story, let's go dance, play music, whatever. Let's go just do anything besides me farting around on my phone. So I think that's the underlying, like, you know when it feels bad and you know when it feels good. And I know that I can stash that away, so I can say, like, I just don't feel like it and I just want to read whatever, hit Reddit on my phone or whatever. And I know that feels bad. And I know that when I tune in and I play with her, that feels good. And it's such a reinforcing factor that I think it's so worthwhile to pay attention to. I think that's one of the core things of this chapter is listen to what feels good and listen to what feels bad. Does
it always feel good though? Or is sometimes it's truly work though? Where it's like, it actually, you know, it's the right thing to do, but it's not actually even meaningful or enjoyable as you're doing it, and it actually.
I hear what you're
It's hard.
saying. It is hard because it's such a simple pleasure to say, no, you know what? You can go play in your room. You can go read a book or whatever. It never feels bad to participate, to do the thing that's a little bit more difficult.
Yeah.
Like I think in our past meetups we've talked a lot about taking the harder path, and the harder path leads to greater rewards. I think it's just a slightly harder path to take. It's not, it's not climbing a mountain. It's just taking a step up on the path instead of just taking the trail that you're already on. It's a slight step up, and I think it's rewarding. I think it's more rewarding than it is difficult, but that it's difficult to take that step up. That just kind of initial little initiative,
Right.
Yeah.
You started the hardest part.
Yeah.
And I think Peterson talks about carry the heaviest load you can. So there's definitely, I think, an upper limit where it's like, hey, I can't make time for it. I'm carrying too much. You don't want to fail them and others.
Sure.
But if you can carry it, it's definitely more meaningful. And I think that's what a lot of this chapter is, trying to figure out where that meaning is in your life, and focusing on those activities and not others, like yelling at someone on social media.
Yeah. Well, and for me, it's being honest with myself with what I can carry.
Mm-hmm.
It is a big part of this chapter, and this whole thing is, I can, if I'm honest with myself, I can carry a lot more than I'm willing to admit a lot of times. And if I'm willing to admit it to myself and to be honest with myself, then I'm willing to admit it in real life, and I'm more willing and more able to enact that in real life, to actually say okay, let's go do something. Let's instead of you just go play and I'll just read my whatever. Let's go actually do something. And it's a difficult little hump to get over, but once you get over that little hump, it's this big hard thing to get over, but then once you do, it's back down to just barely above where you were.
And I think the more you do it too, you develop the neural pathway, so it's maybe not easier, but it feels easier.
It does. And it feels better. It feels good. You feel like you've accomplished something without really putting a whole lot of effort into it. At least personally, I feel like that.
So why don't we all live in that space all the time? So what keeps people then?
It's hard. It's that hump. It's so much easier just to say, just go play. I'm just going to read what I'm going to read. That's so much easier.
Well, I think there's the load issue too. There's only so much you can do. So figuring out what you're going to carry that day is not always an easy task.
No.
And it's decisions too beforehand. It's planning and deciding how you are going to act in certain situations.
Yeah.
I think also you don't leave it up to yourself in that moment. It can also be a strategy.
Okay.
You know yourself and you plan ahead and be like, okay, if this, then this. If I'm approached by child, I always say yes. Or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I always engage in this activity.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think you gotta aim somewhere too. You gotta know what you want for your future, so if those tasks are gonna be meaningful to your future. That's another important aspect I think Peterson's touched on. I don't know how much in this chapter, but it's definitely, you gotta know where you're going.
Well, that's one of my motivating factors. So that you touched on just now is that I think to myself, what would I be proud of, and what would I be ashamed of 10 years from now, 8 years, 5 years, whatever from now, a period of time from now. And I want to do the opposite of that. So I want to be able to look back and say to myself, when my kid wanted to play, I said, yeah, let's play, let's learn, let's do some constructive play, instead of just, here's my screen, that whatever's on my screen, I'm not going to remember 5 years from now. That's just not a thing that's important. What is important is what I'm doing with my kid. And so I think using future self as a mirror is helpful.
Yeah, and it can help definitely call your decisions and figure out, which paths have risks and which ones have rewards. Because there can be a path with a high risk that has a low reward that you don't want to go down. You don't want to blindly make sacrifices.
But you know what's important about that idea is not everyone thinks about where they want to go. Like what the consequences of 1,000 daily small decisions add up to be in the end, I think. There's two futures, right? There's a future in which you don't think about the future and it just happens, right?
It's the willful ignorance.
Yeah, and then that's not going to maybe turn out the way that you want it. Importantly, you've decided, okay, here's the family and life that I want 10 years from now, and this is what it looks like.
Yeah.
So just starting right there, I think, is a step that Peterson's imploring a lot of people to try and make that don't make.
Mm-hmm.
Really short line of sight in terms of getting through today. Today is my as far out as I see, and that's not going to it's not going to inform the best decisions that you can make throughout that day if you're just looking at
just taking it day by day.
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of the chapter where he says, compare yourself to who you were yesterday to today. Only look at yourself, don't look at others, and measure your progress. And it's more important to either stay the same or get better than it is to lose some progress in something. We're definitely more loss averse, and so that losing that 1 inch really matters, where the inches to either maintain or get ahead are all around us, and every inch adds up over time, like you were saying, whether it's in a good direction or a negative direction. So you would definitely have to have an aim to make sure you're on a path that's going where you want to go.
So the third, Tolstoy's 4 options in the face of life being meaningless and evil.
Yeah.
The third one continued to third type of answer to that problem is to continue to drag out life that is evil and meaningless. Weakness, knowing that it's evil and meaningless, but not having the fortitude to do anything about it.
And nothing can come of it.
It's like nihilism. Like, as soon as it has no meaning, we're just killing time. Doesn't matter what I do. I can go, do a bunch of bad things, and I won't be judged on it, and it won't matter. But it does. It affects your time here. So you know that it's got to have some meaning, your actions.
This comes back to my kind of assessment of nihilism. I think the way that I boil it down for myself, because I like logic, I like reason, and I think that nihilism is an easy avenue. Like if you try to out-logic all the arguments and you try to out-reason all the arguments, like maybe you'll end up with nihilism. But I think that ultimately nihilism is just not useful. It's not good for anything. There's no point to nihilism.
It's like
it seems to be like
extreme rationalism.
It is the logical end.
But it doesn't help anything. So even if it's right, so what?
Yeah.
It's not a good answer because it doesn't do anything useful.
Because you can't live in that way.
You can't, and it doesn't.
You can't live as if you believe it.
Well, yeah, why?
There's no, and if you do, you're fucked. Like there's no thing there to hold on to. So.
If you lived as if you believed it, you'd be in one of these 4 categories.
Yeah.
And if you had any strength, you'd be in category 4.
Being
killing yourself. Or
right.
others.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just not useful. It just doesn't, like, even if it's a valid argument, it's not a useful argument. I don't know how to.
Yeah, it doesn't have a good outcome. So even if it was the truth, why would you pursue that truth?
Right. Then just what's the point of humanity? Let's just all quit and we're done here. It doesn't.
It's interesting though, because you couldn't even say that. You couldn't even clearly it's rational.
Okay.
To I think like you could I don't know how you can rationally convince anyone that there's meaning to our existence here.
Well, like I laid out I took a swing at that earlier. I said, just knowing that my actions affects others, whether I care about that or not.
But they're gonna die, and everyone's
gonna rot in the ground, right?
So like
we're all
nothing
worm food.
I mean, you know what I mean? Like it's
Worms gotta eat.
So
man.
ultimately, it
Ultimately,
doesn't
nothing
matter.
matters, right.
But our time while we're here and aware matters, I think,
No, it doesn't matter.
because eventually it'll all be erased.
But exactly,
And my deeds will never affect anyone ever going
Right.
forward, which
But
is
the point
obviously
is-
not true either.
But the point is that you cannot live as if you believe that, and you can't convince people just don't live as if they believe it. You could try your church of nihilism and try and spread it like Christianity, and do your
She's all dead. Yeah.
you know, you could, but people will never. There's nothing enticing about it. People just don't live that way, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that makes it an impossible belief system.
Well, I feel like the organism that we are as humans needs a drive, and nihilism provides possibly an explanation of things, but a really bad explanation of things. And so I think that as humans, we need a drive, and that's just not nihilism's not an answer. It's not a solution, I guess.
Yeah, and even if you said you believed it, even if you said you believed in nihilism, which is wait, you can't believe it.
It must be
You
exhausting.
believe in nothing. You don't have
That's-
beliefs.
That's the Big Lebowski, right? Oh, don't mind him. He's a nihilist. Oh, it must be exhausting. Yeah, it must be. Like,
Even if you
Existential
did
crisis,
say you
right?
believed
Yeah.
it, you wouldn't live as if you believed it.
you
How
wouldn't.
could you?
Because you are alive. You
Right.
don't believe it, I guess.
If you
I
followed
mean,
your beliefs, and we all fall short of our
Yeah.
beliefs, you would do nothing, because why would you?
So it's a dead end road.
And that's one of Peterson's biggest arguments for belief in religion, in God. It's like even the self-proclaimed atheist, he would say, for the most part, doesn't live as if they are an atheist. So they live as if there is a God.
Yeah.
And that's a very interesting concept.
Who the hell do we know what we believe, as he says?
Exactly. Exactly. That's crazy.
Yeah, our actions.
And so true.
Yeah, and he says our actions
Yeah.
actually inform us of what we actually believe,
And we're so blind
and
to
not
them
what we
most
say
of the
we
time.
believe. Yeah.
We can't even interpret what we believe from our own actions.
So an
Without
atheist could be very
a team
Christian
of
and not be
psychologists.
aware of it, because he's doing Christian actions continuously.
Absolutely. Like he would, and when he had that conversation with Sam Harris, that was exactly the claim. It's like, how you don't live, you live as if there is a God, and here's how.
Yeah.
That's a very, it's a bold statement to make to someone, first of all, to say like, no, you say you believe this, but actually the way you live is
Quit your Jesus smuggling.
it suggests otherwise.
Yeah.
You know, and I think you see it. When I heard him talk about that, it made me think of people in the same way of their political beliefs, where they'll say they believe in something politically, or like I am a Democrat, I am a Republican, I'm a conservative, I'm a whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me, when I heard it, I was like, well, the way that you actually live is the absolute opposite of that. And it's just like, you can see that play out, where someone is just kind of surrounded by the meme of a political thought or
Idealism.
tribe.
Right.
And so,
yeah.
like, they think that
Yeah.
they identify in that way, and they think they
Right.
are that way, but actually, the way that you live your life
Right.
suggests that you have this other set of core beliefs that actually guide your actions.
I can't tell you how many Christians have disappointed me.
And it's neither good nor bad. It's just a juxtaposition. There's a gap between self-awareness there.
Yeah, and I think not everyone can live up to their ideals every second of the day. It's such a tough task to execute what you say you believe in. Of course, we all fall short of it. I think it's normal. Whether you're a nihilist or a Christian, you're going to fall short.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's something I struggle with. I mean, part of the Jordan Peterson thing, I mean, a big part of it is the wisdom of religion. Right? And for me, I think I've said it before in our meetups, I'm 0% religious. Like, that doesn't mean that I'm agnostic, anything that you want to label me with. It doesn't mean that's what I am. It just means that I don't have this deeper belief in religion. I just don't. And the wisdom that he's showing me through his writing, through Maps of Meaning, through his lectures, through 12 Rules, it feels worthwhile. It feels like it doesn't make me want to be religious and believe in God and believe in Jesus and all that, but it makes me want to think about how all these stories came to be, and how all of this wisdom came to be, and how there's value in all of that, and how we all need to listen to each other and listen to these stories and these values.
Yeah, when I was younger, I took the Bible very literally. I was in a Christian school, and then I became a teenager, started questioning it. I'm like, how could this literally have happened? This doesn't make any sense.
Right.
I'm very militant atheist.
Because you were told that it was literally this happened, right?
Well, that's why as a child, I didn't have the capacity for metaphor.
Yeah.
Now Peterson's reintroducing, hey, this is more of a metaphor than actual literary. This is storytelling just to provide context for, or examples that we can model and use for extract the wisdom from the past.
Yeah.
He talks
it's a way
about,
of surviving in the past.
Well, or being able to learn lessons from our elders,
Right.
and propagate it forward with retelling the stories. And he gets into archetypes and how there's only like 7 stories in the world, and the hero archetype continues to perpetuate stuff where we slay the dragon, which is a combination of all our fears and whether it's fires or snakes or scales or whatever it is, it's all there.
It feels like evolution.
Yeah, and it's who we were in the past, and I definitely think that as the current generation, it's our job to test it, make sure it still rings true, or that maybe we can test something that we could potentially find a better way. Like things weren't always as good as they are in the Bible. The Bible was a slow process of collecting all these stories and meshing them together into a bigger narrative, and I think it just didn't start out as this is the way it is always been. It was a slow evolution, right? You add more and more stories to it. You refine it. You throw away the stories that don't necessarily ring true, or these other stories tell it better.
So I have a feeling that you don't like Sam Harris that much, but what if that's what he's trying to do?
Well, I think my understanding of Sam Harris, I don't know a lot about him, is he's trying to come up with a rational basis to create morality so we can decide what's good or evil based on logic.
Without a Bible.
Without a
biblical story.
And to me, it doesn't matter whether you do it with logic or you do it with stories. Eventually, you could build stories on that logic. I think because of our limited cognitive ability, it's a lot easier for us to remember stories than it is to remember a hard rule set. The order of the rules, which rule's most important, not just the complete list of the rules. Yeah. I mean, if you look at the laws we have on the books today, no one knows all the laws, let alone what order they go in, what law overrides the other law. So there's just a cognitive limitation, and I think that's why ultimately over time the storytelling wins. So even if he is able to document it all in writing, which I think it's the storytellers who can propel. Luckily, we have a lot of information technology. You'd hope we'd be able to store all that, but still to consume it, to process it, to draw any meaning from it would be a monumental task without storytelling. And I think that's Peterson's point.
And I think that when you were talking about the wisdom and in religion, it's at least to not be so flippant about it.
Sure.
I think that's coming from an atheist perspective as well. It's like, I totally realize what I've been doing. I've just dismissed this entire...
I feel like that's been my 20s. Yeah. My 20s has been, fuck religion.
Yeah.
Honestly, it has been, religion's useless. What's it doing here? Like, why haven't we moved past this?
Right.
Well,
and through this, I've seen, okay, well, you know what? They're good stories. They're evolution of the mind kind of stories. They're how we... They're not just morality 1.0. They're a foundation of morality that you can build on in any direction. It's valuable, and that wasn't something that I thought of before.
Like, keep your house in the perfect order. I mentioned, if he used without the first, sin, cast a stone. It's a story from Jesus' time. He was, there was also the mob was going to stone a woman. And he started writing down their each of the private sins they had done, and people started saying, "Oh wow, I could end up like her."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's the story. And even though we got it down to one phrase, we all know it to be true, and I think that's like a good version of the story of this. And in my 20s, like, I didn't have Peterson's metaphors, but I started to recognize, hey, there's value to faith-based organizations. If you even logically look at how it makes all these people happy. Look at all the family activities. Look how the community it brought together. There's undeniable advantages to faith-based organization, even though they've got corruption issues sometimes and other things you can pick bones with, but. What organization doesn't? You have to realize it's nothing specific to them. And so it was a really interesting thing to go from a militant atheist to like, well, they're not all bad.
See, I saw that as a weakness in my 20s. I saw that as a, look at all these people being placated by this promise of morality.
Yeah, there's something about the lies. Not those people are believing this.
It felt like they didn't have the
false
critical
fiction,
thinking,
or believing this fiction.
Yeah, it felt like they were just here's a delicious plate of dinner, enjoy it, without thinking of where the ham came from, on the whatever. Like nobody thought of how this sustenance came to be, and I think through reading this, like this is led me to is showing me how these stories came to be and why they're valuable. Why they're valuable.
So I started going to the First Christian Church not too long ago,
right?
To check it out and they do a lot of the family activities, and so like it's very nice to be connected with them for the kids and have them be able to do things. The sermons that are delivered in the service they could be chapters in the book.
Okay.
It's just so interesting to me after having read this book, going in there and being like, oh, this is just a Peterson idea.
Okay.
What made me think of that is like you're mentioning the thing that brings them the kind of like offering.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's different than that. I think for many people maybe it is just like as this surface quid pro quo kind of, I believe in Jesus so I can go to heaven. Or I just do this because this is what we do. But when I hear sermons that are as deep as the ideas that are in this book that spoke to me, it makes me think that people are there. They're getting to the same. They're message. One and the same. Yeah. I mean, it's. I
think I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
It's deeper than just what I used to think was going on there, which was superficial and this kind of irrational belief in an afterlife and just trying to save from going to hell. I guess.
Like I don't want to live my life afraid of a God or afraid of a hell. That's just not what I'm going to do. But I like the wisdom contained in the Bible. I like the wisdom that's being shown to me as a wisdom of humanity and as a practical way to create a heaven on earth, even though like that's highly biblical and that's highly religious, creating a heaven on earth. I think that without any kind of religion on my part whatsoever, I think that I could strive for a heaven on earth. I think that's a thing that we could, as humanity, go for.
It's attainable.
I think so. I think we can all, as being better individuals, we can create better groups, and as better groups, we create better individuals. And I think it can be a cyclical thing, and I think that that's a possible thing. And I have no expectation that relies on a God, a Jesus, any sort of biblical figures whatsoever. But I think that it relies on the wisdom of the
metaphors.
All of that. I think it's required for. I think it is a morality 1.0, but it's a morality like holistic morality. It's a thing that's foundational morality that we need to build on.
It's thinking about Sam Harris and the values. When they talk, we were having their conversation. There was this it really came down to this getting to values from facts idea.
Okay.
I think it's like a Hume thing that you cannot get a ought from a is. Does that ring a bell? So like
No,
you can't go from a certain set of facts to a value system is what Peterson is saying, and I think
Okay.
it was a Hume thing. It was like
Okay.
just because a certain set of things being the way they are doesn't suggest how they should be or how you should act.
A bunch of facts doesn't
They're
lead
just-
to a truth kind of thing. Or...
Well,
Yeah,
you perceive the facts through your perception, so they're warped in some ways. So you have meaning in your perception, perhaps.
I highly believe our perceptions are flawed, but yeah. Okay.
But like the values come from somewhere else, not from the facts themselves.
Sure. Yes.
I don't know. I don't think that Harris believes in that. I think he thinks.
I think
that
Harris is trying to. So I watched the Harris thing, and I think that you had a problem with Harris because he didn't seem to read Peterson's material, and I totally agree with that. Like, absolutely, I think he needs to be better versed on it. I think what he's trying to do is take, for people like me, like where I find value now today because of being shown this. I take value in the religious kind of text and the Bible and everything. Like that's interesting to me now, and I think it's a great foundation. I think people like Sam Harris are trying to find the 2.0 version. I think they're trying to find the Bible without the
Stories.
mystical,
Without spiritual element.
yeah,
maybe?
without the spiritual element, or with the solid scientific kind of foundation to build on. But I don't think that you can do that. I think humans need the mystical.
I agree with what you're saying. It's like when they get together and talk, if they could see it from when what Peterson shows is, I think, is that these religious stories, they come out of people behaving. I mean, early humans, right? We're
Yes.
talking about early humans
Yes.
evolving from
Exactly.
from chimpanzees, right? So
Right.
he's really insightful in this idea that our early religious stories are a way of trying to put into context the way that early humans were behaving, right? So they were like behaving in a certain way, and then it was kind of translated into these stories, right? So when I love the Exodus example of Moses, who, you know, they're in the desert, and people are coming to him to solve their problems, right? They fight over something, and he has to solve their problems, and he's their judge, basically.
Okay.
And so they're acting this out, right? And when he gets the 10 Commandments, it's not like they came from God, but what did come from God is like, he was like, oh, everyone's coming to me with these problems. Here's what we're actually doing. We're already living as if we are following these rules, right? So it's not like the rules came down and then they were implemented, as in like, we need to start not coveting because God said so. Actually, we're already behaving as if these are true.
Here's what's
And
working.
the revelation is that the light bulb went off, and like, oh, this is the rule we're following.
Yeah.
I put
This
it
works.
into a sentence.
Yeah.
And that's so.
Sort of what
so that's how
Harris
those
is doing.
things.
He's trying to detect the rules and write them down.
But so that's how those things came about, and it's important to recognize how awesome that is.
Yeah.
It's not, and to not be flippant about that moment in evolutionary
Totally agree.
history.
Yep.
But it's also maybe the case, to maybe move to 2.0, where it's like, all right, we did that, and but now maybe we can understand that development happened, and put that into its context, and go through a new development. And maybe that new development is using science to apply our new scientific method to morality, which for some, as Sam would say, for some reason we don't do, right? We use science to solve all of our huge problems except for this one area, which is possibly the most important for our existence,
Well,
right?
science is extremely rational.
Yeah,
and if you're
I
being
hear you.
extremely rational, you end up in the nihilism camp. Nothing has meaning, and you have no value.
You don't have to.
And that's
do
why
that.
Harris's methodology isn't going to yield the fruit. It's not. That's why you have the ought versus from an
Yeah.
is.
Well, so true, except for that, the way I think he gets there is that there is experience, and there is bad experience, and there's good experience. So,
But without meaning or value, you don't know what's good or bad. You still
do.
have to have the judgment there.
So we're getting into the
All right.
same debate that he would have. No, but it's good because we can flesh out and see if we understand the ideas, because there is value, because there is experience, and there's value associated with the different experiences that we have.
So we could say maybe based on our solar plexus, we have a sense whether it felt good or not.
Or literally, it doesn't feel good. Like, we know that the experience, and Sam, you'd use this example, if you go and put your hand on the stove, it is a bad experience, right? Suffering exists, and there's no arguing your way out of it rationally, right?
Sure.
Physical pain. Okay.
You can't, this is meaningless. Let me continue to do this.
You're gonna have a bad time.
It's still gonna be a bad experience, and
Yeah.
there's no way to argue out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So because there is that value associated with experience, you can then start to apply, okay, what's a better experience? And then you can start looking scientifically at how we create the best possible experience for
So,
the most
For that thinking to matter,
minds.
you have
Okay.
to agree
Yeah.
that long-term planning is a good thing.
Oh, it might be. There might be a multitude of solutions.
And I also think
for
that's where
well-being.
the nihilist versus non-nihilist thing. If you're not living for anything, then long-term doesn't matter. But if you're living for something, all of a sudden long-term matters.
I feel like I can take nihilism and just put it over there and not worry about it anymore. Because, like I said, it's just not useful.
Well, it's I almost feel like that's saying that rational and logic isn't useful, and because
I don't-
obviously it is, but taken to an extreme, it's not useful.
Well, it can just be a tool.
It is a tool. Yeah, it's a reflective kind of a way of looking at things, but it's not a way of living.
But it also doesn't have to be it's a tool, but it also isn't necessarily the best one,
No.
and it might be flawed, right?
Well,
And
it's
so
got its limitations.
Yeah, and so
worth being
the
aware of.
result in nihilism is just one of the flaws. We know we can use this tool of reason to do certain things, but we can also use it to do bad things.
Mhm.
Like any tool. We could use it to justify nihilism and live that way. That would be a bad way to use the hammer.
I think Harris is going to have to reach into the faith category and pull some from that toolbox to
I hope he does.
to connect it. And I think that's pretty much what Peterson's saying. You don't realize it yet, but you're going to have to grab
I think that's the 3.0 answer. I think is taking 1 and 2 and
Together.
making
You
the
both.
3.
We're in
Yeah,
3.0?
it's
We're
got
in
to be.
3.0?
Well, it's got to be, right? Because it's got to be. There's so much wisdom in the religious texts. There's so much wisdom, whether you believe in a God, a Jesus, or whatever. It doesn't. There's so much wisdom there, and this is what works.
there isn't wisdom that exists out there that's more tested than these stories that we decided to pass on from generation to generation.
Yeah,
This is the cream of the crop. This is what we chose to pass on because we felt it was most accurate representation of the world, I think.
and now we have so much science that says, okay, well, this is all magic. Like let's take a step back and let's see what we can prove. Let's see what we can examine. Let's see what we can do. But there's got to be like a melding of those two, and that's got to be where it's at. Like
Yeah.
you got to combine them.
I completely agree. You need faith and reason. You need both sides of the coin. Our brains work, and that's Peterson's laying that out in a lot of the neuroscience of how those two, faith and reason, are mapped to either sides of the brain and how they work in unison. And there's got to be a reason we're biologically built for that, and we can explore those reasons. But since we are built on that, we have to use both of those tools, and we can definitely make conscious decisions to rely on more one than the other. But if you're too much faith based, you're going to have a bad time. Just like if you're too much logic based, you're going to have a bad time. You really need both of those hemispheres working for you.
So how do you evolve both of them at the same time?
Well, I think it's practice. You got to practice logic and reason. You got to practice faith. Like we all practice faith whether we believe it or not. I believe that the paper in my wallet's worth something. That's faith. That doesn't really actually
Right.
mean that the paper in my
Right.
wallet's worth something.
Absolutely.
So there are different tools, and you could try to have some science that explains why the economics work the way it does, but there's still a lot of unanswered questions in economics. I think we use the faith part of our brain to come up with a hypothesis, and the logic and reason side to actually test it and prove it.
I don't know. I'm still not sold on 3.0.
Maybe not 3.0. So more
this-
like a 2.5. Like more like a. What does it take to bring
Well,
1.0 and to bring religion and Sam Harris?
I
right?
think
Is
the,
it
the
just-
way it is, we have two tool boxes, and we're stupid not to reach in the other two boxes, and when that's the better tool for the job.
Like, yeah, I don't mean 3.0 as an incremental. This is better than that. I mean, how do we reconcile one with the other? Say A and B is C or whatever. It doesn't. It
Or-
doesn't need to be a major upgrade.
You're
of
handicapping
those
yourself.
terms.
I
if you
don't know why we
pull from
would
both.
need. Why? Maybe I don't know what you mean by faith. Like,
Hmm.
faith. Why would we need faith? And what do you mean by it? Like
Fair
faith
question.
in a metaphysical being, or
So I don't feel like I need faith or a belief in God, a belief in Jesus. I don't need that in my life. I don't have any desire for that. But I feel like there's great, valuable wisdom in the Bible, in a lot of religious teachings. I feel like there's a lot that matters to humanity, that matters to my future, that matters to that I really want to think hard and long about.
so by faith, do you mean like the faiths, the religious faiths that are in the world now?
I suppose. I mean,
Because what's strange about the Bible and they're there and they're not gonna change.
well, they have changed a lot. They've been edited and tailored toward.
Yeah, they didn't just
What
come.
we're doing.
Bible just didn't appear out of nowhere.
Yeah, they are a product of change.
Iteration.
The Bible is the Bible.
What is now?
Yeah.
But what's it going to be in 100 years? It's going to be a different Bible.
Will it?
Yeah, we've already
I think-
translated how many times?
I think so.
Well, I don't know, but I mean, I
What was it
understand
100
that
years
the books
ago?
were written. I understand that the books were written over a course of period of time, but
And edited.
for
Sorry.
1,000 years, they've been
Consistent.
pretty much the Bible, right?
Well,
I mean,
but
it's like-
they had 9,000 years to test them. I mean, it's hard to find a flaw in them at that point, right? You
I
gotta.
guess what I'm saying is like the problem. One of the problems with faith, in terms of like the religious context, is to me it seems stagnant. It is what it is. And although there's a lot of wisdom in it, we can reasonably take what's wise from it and understand how we understand it through reason, that this is good to take and this is bad to take and this is good to move forward.
I feel like faith is evolutionary. I feel like the Bible as it exists today, the religious text, whatever prevailing wisdom of today is based on things that happened in the past. And I feel like today is the future's past, right? So I feel like 100 years, 1,000 years, whatever, the Bible will be different to 100-year future me, or 1,000-year future me will be different. It will be based on what works for our society over time, which is what I think the Bible is what works for our society over time. Like, this is why various religious groups do what they do, is because this is what works for these religious groups, and this is what allows them to procreate and to expand their empires.
I do agree that there's diminishing returns. We're less likely to see change over the next 100 years versus the first 100 years, right? It's almost like an exponential thing that as time tests everything, it's going to be harder and harder to find faults.
Yes.
But I think the other thing, too, is that the story that's told is a metaphor. So it's almost inherently like a lower resolution that you have to learn to apply to your life. And as you live these experiences, you have details and maybe other tweaks you can apply to it that gives you a higher resolution or a better model. And I think over time, I hope those feed back into the stories.
Yes.
If enough
I
people
hope
experience
the feedback
this.
too.
And I think there's definitely a path. If you take the Bible as static, you're doing yourself a disservice because it can get better. It's almost like predestination. You're like, oh, these are the rules and they're never going to change. It's like, no, our perception of the rules could get better. And if you leave yourself open to that, guess what's going to happen?
I think that's better articulated as what I was thinking, is that it gets better over time.
Or as long as we believe it can get better, we have
Interpretations
all evidence to
change
believe.
over time.
Yeah.
Like, what does change is the people that are interpreting it.
And language evolves too.
Yeah, well, and as you start off from a baseline of plus 10, now you can get to 11, whereas, previous generations could never get to 8. Like, I think that I think that as our understanding of the world evolves, our understanding of religions evolves, and it's all evolving.
And to jump back to my faith using money description, it's like, I don't need a mathematical proof to spend the money in my wallet. I'm going to operate on faith that it is what others say it is.
Sure.
See, I like that example, though, because, I can also reason you into the value of money.
Yeah, you can.
I feel like
you can negotiate what I think it's worth. You can actually affect what maybe $1 to you is 99 cents, and maybe you can tell me why I should devalue my own dollar.
I just feel like money is a very reasonable thing, because we just can decide that we need something of value to commit to
commerce. It's
to
a
engage
very
in commerce, and so
To
it's very
exchange,
reasonable
yeah.
for us to
it crosses
create money, and I understand where the value of money comes from, and that it is tied to the value of its ability to purchase goods.
but it's a very
all that seems reasonable. I don't know.
it's a very social thing. Like I said, it's very based on other people's perception. So it's not as hard as thinking. Even though we represent or count it, and measure it in numbers, which is very hard science, very concrete. The actual pinnings of it are very emotional. Let's say, right? It's what people feel about it at the time. Now, even though we have so much supposedly in Fort Knox, it doesn't matter because it's what the country feels it's worth, or other countries think our money's worth. Right? There's a whole complex system there that we don't understand, and even though there are things we don't know about it, right? We have to take some faith in your value, other people's value assessment on the money for it to even operate.
I mean, we have galaxies that are spewing diamonds, right? Like, I mean, it's not we just picked a thing, and we picked a thing that is difficult to come by.
Yeah, gold, rarity.
And we assigned value to it, and we all agreed on it, and now we have faith in that agreement.
If alchemy had come around, we created, found a method to create more gold in the world. Well,
gold wouldn't be the thing anymore.
It's
It'd
interesting
be platinum
'cause,
instead.
Faith, but it is a fact as well.
It's interesting because it's the blending of the two, and that's how you get a great system.
Yeah, it's an agreed upon.
But
it's an agreed upon fact.
as a programmer, I can't program a program that's going to determine the value of money because it's purely a social basis.
But a fact is that I can buy 1 gallon of
something.
gasoline for $3.69. It's not a faith. I don't have faith in that.
You have your faith. No, you have faith in that.
do.
You do. There's no way you could possibly know there's a gas station that's selling for that exact amount. You just have faith you can find one.
I made that up, but I'm assuming it's like I tried to just let me go and walk and see what the price of gas is over there and use that number. But I mean,
it's very much a wider definition of faith. It's not as specific as people think it is of faith being church. I'm just trying to explain that portion of your brain, how the neuroscience works, to that broader definition and how they're related. Because going to the religion example, you can believe in a God, but what does that mean, right? Do you have faith in the God? No, maybe I have faith in the metaphor that is God. I don't really believe there's an imaginary man in the sky.
Do you think that all of the value of the Bible, that so I kind of posed this interpretation of these teachings being kind of a stories about what we were acting out as early humans, right?
Yes.
And like us discovering these things about our existence and our behavior, and then writing them down and trying to refine it
Sharing it.
as like this is what works, right? Do you think though that given, and let's say that we've evolved to be more reasonable, perhaps more intelligent, maybe, do you think that without the Bible, do you think we could currently reason ourselves into the same teachings and positive things that are in the Bible?
I think
So that's where I'm getting. That's why I think that where the crux of this faith thing is like, can we reason ourselves into those values?
I think that's what Sam Harris is trying to do.
Yeah, and I think you look at other religions. There's so much commonalities between religions. It's actually pretty crazy for considering where they came from. Having had no communication with the other side of the world, they ended on some of the same similar things. Not they're all identical, but I mean those maybe the areas we're still negotiating and trying to figure out. So I definitely think of it in a vacuum. It all gets recreated, and I think I forgot what they said. It was something about Nietzsche.
You think it all gets recreated as religious revelation, or through reasonable exploration?
Maybe both. I don't think it's one or the other. Maybe because you definitely see like with the environmental movement, it's very much become a religion. All these atheists very much believe in something and really much have a meaning. Peterson's talked a lot about the environmental, how that's replaced God in a lot of people, or the government has replaced God, right? You believe in the government and it's going to take care of you. So in a vacuum, yeah, absolutely, it gets recreated, and maybe it doesn't necessarily look the same, but from a certain angle, they have a lot of similarities.
I guess like if we were to undertake Sam's project, you know,
And before Peterson, I would consider myself. That was one of my goals too, is do exactly what Sam says. So I think it's a very noble goal.
do you think Sam is criticizing the world
Before setting his
Or
own
setting
house in
his own-
perfect order.
I don't know anything about his house.
Is it the right project to undertake to
I think,
construct a moral
yeah.
landscape for?
I'm glad somebody is.
Okay.
I don't think that he's going to be able to do it. And I hear what you're saying, that I think that I don't think humans are ready yet to be scientifically based, you know, to think of the world in pure logic and without religion. Like, I just don't think that humans are there yet.
Doesn't catch as quickly, does it?
It doesn't. I mean, it feels like we're predisposed to think in this religious way. Like, and I feel like I'm glad that somebody like Sam Harris is intelligent enough to try to put forth an argument that doesn't rely on it. But I think it's going to take a lot more work.
I think he's just spinning up another story, and there's no harm in that.
Yeah.
I think the fact that he wants to make the world a better place means he's a believer of God. That, by my definitions. Just the fact that he's trying to improve it shows that. And
So you think he believes in God?
Oh, absolutely. His actions already show that. I mean, that's what Peterson's whole point is. So he wants to improve things. We can all agree to that, right? He wants to make the world a better place. And if he can come up with a higher resolution or a story that's told better through time, that's an iteration on the ideas of the Bible and can move forward. And he'll be able to, take it to the next level.
But his story is without a God.
It doesn't matter whether he describes God in the story or not. The fact that he's trying to improve the world implies that he believes there is a God. There's a reason for things to be better. There is judgment on his actions on his time here. That it's a better game for all of us to be playing if we're trying to improve the world. I believe that's a belief in God if you're trying to improve things.
So that's what God is then, is the...
I don't know. Peterson has a definition of God. It's kind of nice because it fits not metaphysically, but it's like the thing that I don't know. It's you need the right words to phrase it, but it's the thing that you value most, basically, like
so we're using
highest value is your God.
Okay, so we're just using God interchangeably with a high value system of belief.
Yeah, well, look, everyone has probably a different definition of God, and that's one of the hardest things to understand because if you take it as a metaphor, then it could mean all sorts of things. And if you take it as the imaginary cartoon character in the sky, well, you're gonna have a bad time. I think it's a really low resolution for kids, but as soon as you get serious about it, as soon as you develop that critical thinking and that ability to see metaphor, read underneath the surface, between the lines of text, as soon as you get that ability and that be able to extract that context, a whole world opens up. And like I said, all of a sudden these stories are models that you can apply in your life in almost any situation. They've got it covered because I've talked about it, whether it's Job or Moses or a creation myth.
So if we could have a system that you didn't have to read between the lines, that'd be ideal, right?
It would be great, but I think the actual rules are so detailed that we would be able to all process it. We'd become experts in one area, but not all areas. I think that's why we have.
That's what I feel like Sam Harris is trying to do. He's trying to create something where you don't have to read between the lines.
I think
it's
great.
Say,
and with the information age, we'll have a chance of actually hanging on to that, and so people can iterate and improve on that, higher detail.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that corpus is going to be pretty much worthless because you'd have to spend a lifetime studying it. But I think it would give better backing to the metaphors and stories, right?
Or you'd have to take it on faith.
Well, there's going to be a gap between the two. But it would be cool if you could take the story of Job and then Sam Harris's research of what the basis, the ground penny, and actually dig down into the individual rules. But I think the rules are going to be so many millions, it's going to be hard to tell which one's more important than the other because it's more than just having an inventory of every rule. It's a prioritization of all those rules too.
Yeah.
A lot of that I get from the programming stuff because that's what a program is. It's not just a list of instructions. It's an order of those list of instructions, and it's almost like prioritizing them, figuring out the right. And a lot of bugs in the software is due to things being in the wrong order.
When you're not everybody is going to have a full understanding of those programs or of those ideas. So you're going to have a select few that have a full understanding of it, and you're going to have faith in those select few. So we're still coming back to the same thing.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. That's we are only able to store a low resolution, and maybe the best way to encapsulate that is storytelling, and that's why stories are so effective, and we tell them to our children, right? It's what we want to pass on, make sure they understand, so they're prepared for the world, and hopefully they develop the ability to fill those low resolution, the gaps in knowledge with what they need to actually apply them in the world.
This is the easiest way to provide a toolbox of things that work for humanity.
Well, you'd be able to decode the past, really, right?
Yeah.
If we can decode the wisdom of the past and bring it with us, we're much more powerful than if we were to have to read a book of all Sam Harris's rules.
Right. Which you would just be placing your faith in because you maybe...
Yeah, you'd have to believe that he did what he said he did to develop it. And, I mean, I think if Sam Harris did that, it would be a very Peterson-like experience where we were like, oh yeah, I agree with that. Oh, absolutely. You'd be rediscovering things we already know because, like you said earlier, it's like him looking at how we behave around the rules and trying to write those down. Mm-hmm. And there's definitely value in trying to have a high resolution. But you could also say it's a fool's errand, because it's repeating what's already been done. So you could say it's inefficient and a waste of time. But if you learn about like the creative process, I mean, they always say it's all been done before. Simpsons did it, right? But that's the whole point. Is we copy till we understand it, till we improvise, and then we can improve on it. It's part of the learning process, and you're only going to get better by redoing it. Anyways, we're definitely about a half an hour over, so if we want to bring this to a close.
Yeah, so next week we'll do the same chapter because we didn't solve shit.
It always feels that way too, but that's when our meetup, yeah. we do the 12 rules and we start over. Because there's always something new going over the rule stuff. And you guys have been over the rules twice. I haven't. Has that been your guys' findings?
It's our second time around. Yeah, I mean, I think the first time through, we were able to stick more to what was in the chapter because we were sharing for the first time kind of our thoughts on it. The conversations tend to go anywhere they want now, I think.
I think so. So... I guess we can shut it down. one of the things from this chapter, since we are talking about Rule 6, we can close with something really, really easy. So every person is too complex to know themselves completely, and we all contain wisdom that we cannot comprehend. Right? I feel like that's the whole, like, the solar plexus thing. Like, you know when you're doing something that's not great.
We don't know how we know.
We don't know how we know, and maybe it's impossible to analyze. Maybe it's not. So simply stop when you apprehend, however dimly, that you should stop. Stop acting in that particular despicable manner. Stop saying those things that make you weak and ashamed. Say only those things that make you strong. Do only those things that you could speak of with honor. I mean, it's
Okay.
it's impossible, right? I mean, it's something to aim for. It's that North Star that you can aim for. You can start stopping today. I like that. I like that phrase. Like,
Yeah.
you find yourself in this thing that, and I do it. Like, whether it's a conversation with my wife, whether it's something I'm doing with my kid, whether it's something I'm doing at work, it doesn't matter what it is, but you can find something where you just feel like this isn't quite right. This isn't quite. I'm positioning. I'm maneuvering. I'm doing something that's not entirely on aim. You can start stopping to do that instantly.
Yes.
You can just decide to stop doing that.
Mm-hmm.
You can.
And that doesn't even entail doing something else.
No,
Necessarily,
you just
stop
stop
doing
doing
that.
that. Like, just stop doing it. Just stop it. Yeah. So it's impossible, but it's easy.
It's a great actionable piece of advice. And like I said, every inch matters. It all adds up. As long as we aim towards it, we can make our worlds a better place and then each other's worlds.
That's the key. I'm
It's a
good.
great closing line, right?
All right, guys.
All right.
We're trying to do this every Saturday at 8:30 p.m. Next week, I'm actually out of town, so we're probably going to skip that. But hopefully we'll be back at some point with maybe Rule 7. Or later. We'll figure it out.
All right.
All right. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you guys later.